Good afternoon, everybody. As if you haven't seen enough of me, right? Hopefully you didn't all catch me dancing last night. I had a lot of fun, and it was my birthday, so I had a great excuse. Okay, I am, again, want to welcome everybody for coming. Thank you, thank you. And I have the great honor of introducing our next keynote speaker, Mr. Manny Menendez. And I have a brief description, which I'm not going to read the whole thing because this is the brief one, but he's just going to wow us with all his information. Mr. Manny Menendez III, better known as Manny, or Manuel, sorry, is a veteran international businessman and entrepreneur who has been successfully doing business in China and the Asia-Pacific region for nearly 4 decades. He is the founder of MCM Group Holdings Limited, 8M8 LLC organizations specializing in international business development, investment and trade, and whose activities are focused on the Asian Pacific region, with special emphasis on the People's Republic of China. He's past president and board member of the Honolulu Executives Association, and he's responsible for Hawaii being a member of IEA. And without further ado, I'm just going to introduce Manny Menendez.
First of all, aloha. Got to start off the right way from Hawaii. I flew in from Beijing, China, the day before yesterday. Rini was kind enough to pick me up at the airport. But before I start, I'd like to thank Rini, Dennis, who I heard this morning from the Fort Lauderdale Association, Connie, of course, old friend Betty Adams, and I have 2 of my colleagues from Honolulu here, Pete Seymour and his lovely wife, so aloha. So I switched my presentation around. I met many of you over the last day and a half, and I'm going to start off with the China piece rather than doing that second, and then I'm really going to try to focus a little bit more on association stuff as a former president, because I think it would be more relevant to the group and maybe helpful, because I have some maybe stories to tell and maybe some of those takeaways you can, it could be helpful for your association. So let me start off with China, and then we'll go from there, because China is a phenomenal story. I've been there since the opening. Can I take this thing out? I hate to be stationary. I'm going to come down here and kind of move around. Then I could see the slides as well. So how to be successful doing international business and China market update. So here's a China market update. China, U.S. GDP versus China, you can see we're at around $19 trillion. China is now at $11 trillion. And then you can see the rest of the kind of top 10 there. And by the way, there's a large contingency from Canada here. You're on that list. I just wanted to show you that. The world GDP, if you look at China and the U.S., 40% of the world's GDP is 2 countries. 2 countries. There's 200 nations in the world, so 2 countries represent 40%. It's a big deal. Here's what happened. I've started going to China in 1979. I did a joint venture in 1980 with a big food company, and that was the first joint venture between the United States and China, an equity joint venture. I've been busy ever since. It's a huge market. I've had faith in China's ability to make money. I hear a lot about communism. I'm still looking for a communist in China. All I find is capitalists. Never found a communist. I mean, it's unbelievable, the ethic and work ethic and making money in China. Let's look at the GDP growth rate. You can kind of see the U.S. and China. China is going to end up this year around 7% GDP growth rate. And of course, our economy is larger. Our prediction now is around 2% GDP growth rate. The trade imbalance, I want to kind of spend a second on this. The trade imbalance between the U.S. and China is significant. We ship in around $100 billion worth of goods. China ships in around $463 billion to the U.S. And there's a lot of political debate over that. But let me just kind of clarify one thing. The Chinese do not ship anything to the United States unless they got paid for it. So that means that a U.S. company is causing the trade deficit because Walmart, if you go into Walmart, 80% of what's in Walmart is from China. So when you hear this political debate, well, the trade imbalance, we're ordering stuff from China that's made in China by U.S. companies who set up their manufacturing there, not only to get lower cost goods, but also to penetrate the market of China now that it's the 2nd world's largest economy. So here's kind of inbound, outbound investments. This is a paradigm shift. The money that's coming out of China is significant. It's huge. So there's been the kind of this inverse chart here. China has now invested this past year $170 billion in outbound investment. So more and more money is going outside of China. Just like U.S. companies who established themselves in China to get part of that market, the Chinese now are establishing their business outside of China to get other markets. And I have a philosophy, my philosophy of my company, and saying is world peace through world trade. I believe that when companies and countries work together, they don't kill each other. When they're interdependent and they need each other, we don't usually kill each other. So more trade. Trade is the way of keeping everybody peaceful, in my opinion. This is a foreign direct investment just in the U.S. In 2016, over $45 billion was invested in the U.S. from China. This was what I used to see in the late 70s on Chang'an Avenue. Chang'an Avenue is like the Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. That's the main road in Beijing. This is what Shenzhen or Beijing looked like in the 1970s. This is what everyone wore in China in the 1970s. It was either green or blue, and that's it. That was the colors of China. This is a Shanghai Main Street in the 1970s. This is Shenzhen as it was being developed. Shenzhen was the first special economic zone in China. This is Chang'an Avenue, again in the 1980s, kind of a lot of bicycles. All those people on the left are riding bicycles. Deng Xiaoping then came out with a saying that it's glorious to make money. And as soon as he said that, guess what? That was, the genie was out of the bottle. So the open door policy really was an experiment of having socialism and a cocktail with capitalism, and everybody in the West said it wouldn't work. It worked. This is Beijing today. This is from my office looking out at the skyline in the central business district. This is Beijing of today, which I don't like. Traffic is #1 in the world in Beijing. They beat out Mexico City. So it is the worst, absolutely the worst. Now, in our association, if that phone rang, that's a $10 penalty. Put $10 for the IEA right now. Okay. This is Shanghai of today. Unbelievable. Now, where you're looking at is Pudong. When I first went to Pudong in the 1990s, that was a rice field. And I was with the mayor of Shanghai, and he says, we're going to make this into a big area for business. And the Chinese built it, and I can tell you in the 1990s, I brought people there. And my coughing, by the way, that's from the pollution in China, which I'm going to show you in a second. But when I went there, and it was just a rice field, there were many buildings built, no occupancy. And I took some Westerners, and they said, look how stupid the Chinese, they built all these buildings, no one's there. I said, you don't understand. They'll be there. The Chinese have confidence that people will move in. And guess what? You can't find a space on Pudong in the Shanghai area. This is Shenzhen of today. When I went to Shenzhen in 1979, it was a fishing village of 30,000 people. And I remember picking lychee off the trees. Now that's Shenzhen of 18 million people. Unbelievable. In my lifetime, this is what I've seen. Now, what the big paradigm shift I want to share with you is China's moved from a world factory to a world market. That's relevant to some of the businesses in the International Executive Association, because some of us, even if we're small businesses, can succeed in China, and I'm living proof of that because I'm a small business. Here's a company, and I want to kind of focus on this for a second. This is Fuyao Glass. They took over a facility here in the United States. They're the largest manufacturer of windshields in the world. But they're making an investment in the U.S., just like we talk about the, okay, I have some up there, but thank you. They're making an investment in the U.S. They set up a factory, and they're supplying, they're a tier 1 supplier to many automotive companies. So the Chinese are also creating jobs in the U.S. for Americans. I mean, it's just like when we go over there, we're creating jobs. And the more we do that, I go back to world peace, to world trade, the better it is. This is the glass. There's about 2,500. This is in Ohio. I know there's some folks here from Akron. These are some of the top acquisitions recently. You know, Hainan bought a part of Hilton Group, so forth and so on. So there's a lot of activity and mergers and acquisitions between China and the United States and elsewhere. This is a deal that was done right here in Florida. This is Wanda. A friend of mine is the chairman. He's the second richest guy in China, Mr. Wang. And they acquired, you know, Ironman, the Triathlon Corporation, and I think they did the deal for $650 million right here in Florida. What's some of the keys for international business? Definitely finding the right partner. Most people who do international business, especially Westerners, they're not patient about doing the due diligence and spending the time and finding the local partner. Americans, especially, and I'm going to use American, we kind of rush. We want to get to the, let's get to the bottom line. Let's do the deal. Let's move quickly. So that pole that we heard this morning, I have a saying similar, that if you want to be successful in China and Asia and in international business, I always say go slow to finish first. Do the right things first. Do the due diligence. Make sure you have the right partner. Make sure the three principles that I've learned, they sound simple, but I'm going to go through them. One is mutual understanding. Make sure that your understanding with your partner is the same. Make sure your goals and objectives are the same. Now that sounds easy to do, but it takes a lot of time to do it well. The other is mutual respect. I hear many Westerners go to China and they say, oh, China is, the law is this bad and I don't like this and I don't like that. You know what I tell them? Do the research on the rules and regulation before you go. If you don't like it, don't go. But don't go to a foreign country and start complaining about the rules and regulations. It's their country. They come to our country, they got to follow our rules. We go to their country, we have to follow their rules. So don't complain about that. You have mutual respect. And the last, and this is probably the most important, is make sure with every deal you do internationally, especially in China, that there's mutual benefit. Mutual benefit is important. That makes sure that both parties or all parties are part of the economic equation. If you're the only one winning, I can tell you your survival rate in China will be very short. Make sure everybody wins. That's mutual benefit. So let's look at GM. GM, they have sold more cars since 2010 in China than they have in the United States. They're bringing billions of dollars, hopefully home to the United States, but they're making billions of dollars in China with SAIC, Shanghai Automobile International Corporation. Now let's look. Their growth, 2010 to 2016, they sold from 2.35 million vehicles to almost 4 million vehicles. They're making a lot of money in China. So you see, I mean, one of the most popular brands that you don't see here that much is Buick. You see Buicks all over the place. Chevys are really prolific in China. But this, again, goes back to world peace, to world trade. Everybody's making money. The Shanghai group is making money. Well, GM is making money. Vehicles sold in China, 28 million vehicles. That's why there's traffic. And there's only 17.5. It's the biggest vehicle market in the world. So if you have anything that does with anything with vehicles, and by the way, used cars is a new market in China. There's about 12 million used cars sold in China. So big opportunities and knowledge about how to do that. Here's luxury car sales. Number one luxury car sale market in the world now is China. I mean, Mercedes is hitting it out of the park. Look at the growth. Look at these numbers. That means that people have money in China. The big thing and the big aha is that there's a birth of a middle class in China. So over 20% of the Chinese population are the middle class now. 20% of the Chinese population is equal to the entire population of the United States. So that's a big number. So China has 1.4 billion people. We have about 330 million people in the United States. It's a big number. So 22% of the Chinese population is now the middle class buying. And an interesting point is that the center of gravity of some of the design is now moving to China for some of these companies. It used to be Detroit, but now it's going to China. Why? Because China's making and selling more cars than anywhere. Usually your design centers for certain models are being now designed in China and made in China. Starbucks, I call Starbucks our Seattle embassy. When I go to China, there's many Starbucks that I I can't live without. I always try to support U.S. companies when I'm there, and I'm definitely in a Starbucks more often than I should be. But they are, that's the second largest the second largest markets, period, for Starbucks, and it'll be, I think, within a couple years, the first market. I was just at this Starbucks headquarters a month ago, and they were talking the explosive growth that they're having in China. This is the first store in Beijing. This is what it looks like. It's always crowded. They have a beautiful two-story Starbucks that I normally go to close to my office in Beijing. It's open 24 hours. There's never a seat. It is always full. Respect and adapt to the local culture. Respect is very important. I already mentioned that. But adapt to the local culture so that you don't stick out. I mean, you follow the local ways. And that is not only a guide for China, but if I was doing business in Canada, there's a different style. If I go to Ohio, there's a different idiosyncrasy than guys doing a business in New York. Even in our country, if you go to Texas, there are just local idiosyncrasies that are different, and you need to respect that. This is what Coca-Cola looked like in 1927 when it went to China. They did a bad job on the translation. The first translation, and remember, these companies Coca-Cola had a lot of money, but the first translation they did was Tadpole Bites Wax. That didn't. They were wondering from a marketing perspective why they didn't sell anything. Then they translate it, and it's now called Delicious Happiness. Their sales have gone up. And then what they're doing is between 2015 and 2017, Coca-Cola is investing $4 billion in China, and they do a lot of great labeling that they don't do here in the U.S., but for every holiday, for every event, they have a can that has something on it. It's pretty neat. This was when I first went to Shenzhen. They're tearing down one of the old buildings, but you can see in the distance the first McDonald's. Kentucky Fried Chicken is knocking it out of the park in China. They're doing a fantastic job. There's the Colonel, and there's a line when KFC first opened up. The lines were incredible, but they're still doing very well. There's over 5,000 stores in 1,000 cities in China 2016 for KFC. They're making a lot of money there. And what they were able to do is they localized the menu to local products, again, to fit into the local environment. And they're doing very well. You can get congee, which is a good breakfast morning dish in China, for 6 renminbi, I think it is. The exchange rate is about 6.7 renminbi to $1. So that's less than $1. There's first McDonald's in Shenzhen. McDonald's, again, was just sold to actually a friend of mine's company. They took over the rights called CITIC. It's mentioned in my bio. I've worked with them a long time. One of the fantastic things is they have such a great online system. You order from McDonald's, and then there's a system. As soon as you order, you can look on your computer. It checks off that you ordered. It shows that it's in progress. And when it says it's in delivery and it's going to be delivered, that guy's knocking on the door. When that click, it's delivered. It's unbelievable, their systems. You could count on that guy knocking on the door when that clicks. So they're advanced in some of their delivery methodologies. P&G was one of my clients early on. I took the chairman way back in the early 1980s, John Smale, and his president to China. And now it is a huge, huge billions of dollars being made by P&G in China. This is some of their products. A big trend right now, a program in Seattle that I know failed was their bicycle program. The city was putting a lot of money into it. But I can tell you in China now, they have bikes. You just take your iPhone, you scan the barcode, the lock opens up. It's all on GPS. They know where the bikes are. And it's enormous, the amount of people that are riding bikes, including myself a few days ago. And then when you're done, you lock it, and it's done. You know, it gets charged. You could see it charge on your phone. You know, it's unbelievable. And it's typically like 1 renminbi. Remember, 6.7 renminbi, 1 renminbi per hour. So it's really inexpensive. And now they're taking that and they're launching it in cities across the United States. because they have a wonderful system that works. Connections are important. The Chinese word is called guanxi. Guanxi is also what our associations are about. Relationships, trusted relationships, and guanxi is one of the key words of being successful in China. Relationships and connections. Chinese traveling abroad. I usually ask this question before I show it. How many Chinese do you think are traveling abroad? Usually most people don't get the number right. But in 2016, about 125 million Chinese are traveling now abroad. That is a huge number. They're the largest traveling population in the world now. And they do tourism, and they do business trips, but that is big, and it affects Florida as well. They also talked about the Chinese as the walking wallets. That's the expression used because they spend a lot of money when they travel. This kind of gives you an idea. Chinese expenditures in the United States in 2016 were, what was that, 33 billion? And about 3 million tourists from China came to the U.S., and it's growing. It's a growing number. Why? Go back to what I said before. There's an affluent middle class, and more middle class, more spending. And the folks up in Canada have seen that actually for quite a long time. I heard a phone, that's another $10. We made 20 bucks so far. Chinese tourists visiting Florida. I thought since we're in Florida, I should kind of talk about that. You can see the growth rate between 2011 and 2016. 140,000 Chinese came to Florida in 2011, and in 2016, 312,000. So more and more people are traveling. What does that relate to us? If you have a business that is anything to do with retail or hospitality, you need to make sure you have stuff translated into Chinese at least at a minimum. Or your website should have Chinese on your website and multiple language. Not a big deal to do, but you should at least have that so that you can attract these visitors to your place of business. And guess what? The Chinese buy real estate. I met a gentleman, I don't know if he's still here, I think he couldn't come today, who's in the flooring business, one of your members. And Chinese are buying condos. Like if you go to Seattle and go to a city outside of Seattle called Bellevue, it's like China. I mean, everyone I see walking on the street, half of them are Chinese because they're buying condos, they're buying apartments. And why are they doing that? So that's the outcome that they're buying it. Yeah, they have money. Yes, they're the middle class. They're buying it primarily because they want their kids to go to school in the U.S. So they buy an apartment that gets them into the local system, and then they're going to school. Why do they want their kids to go to school? Because they know that if their son or daughter have an international education, they have a chance at getting a better job back in China. So here's, again, average spending per trip by the Chinese, $6,000 to $7,200 per person, per trip. Big money. And one of the reasons the luxury sales, which I'm going to get into in a second, the global luxury sale market, so the people who have things like Tiffany or Vuitton or Hermes or Gucci, Chanel, I mean, the Chinese just eat that stuff up when they come to the U.S. You know why they buy it in the U.S. versus back in China? Because they know it's not counterfeit. They're worried that when they go into the store in China that it's counterfeit, honestly. So they buy it outside. So that's why the spending is so significant. And if you look at, I did this one slide so you can see what the global impact, 50% of all the global luxury sales are from Chinese. But if you look at it from luxury sales in 2016, almost 80% of the consumption is when they leave China and go outside and shop. So when you go to New York or any of the major cities, Seattle, Honolulu had the #1 and #2 Vuitton store in the world, #1 and #3. Again, mostly because of Japan, but now it's all about China. Here's just some lines when they have a new product come in. And this is in Shanghai, Hermes. This is in Shanghai as well at the Vuitton store. Domestic savings, highest in the world. So Chinese have a lot of money in the bank. They have a propensity to save. Retail sales are kind of going up. You can see from 2000 to 2016, it's $4 trillion. It's part of a Chinese government strategy to not count on exports to drive the economy, but to create domestic spending. That's what they want to do. That's what saves our country, by the way. Anytime we have a hiccup, our domestic spending, our domestic consumption saves our country. If we counted on exports alone, we'd be in big trouble. The big day's coming up. Remember this day, 11/11. 11/11 is called Singles Day. That's the largest shopping day in China. Last year, they sold, let's see, $17.8 billion worth of product in one day. One day. So that's called Singles Day, 11/11. And you watch see if they break that number this year. This is IKEA, more apartments, more people ownership. So a lot of the people who supply furniture, rugs, anything for your home are hitting it out of the park in China. Outdoor apparel, as a quick look, growing because there's a trend for lifestyle in China now. And so this is a good example where North Face is just making more and more and more money in this sector. VF, which stands for Vanity Fair, they own all these brands. Look at their growth. They went from 2012 to 2017. They're looking at $1 billion growth from 2012 to 2017, all in China. Again, middle class buying a lot of stuff now. Chinese net citizens, huge. There's 600 million internet users in China and growing. This is the Apple store in Beijing. This is the real Apple store because there was actually 4 stores in China where the stores and the products were counterfeit. 4. And the people who worked in the store actually thought they worked for Apple. They had Apple IDs, Apple shirts. Everything was counterfeit, including the store. Now, we think about products, but I think taking it to the level of the actual store and the actual IDs, the Chinese government shut that down, but it was unbelievable. But this is the real one. Apple is China's #1 technology brand. They made nearly $43 billion in China in 2016. So there's a market there. That's a big market. Wine consumption, I was talking to someone, who's my friend from Sonoma, right here. I tell you about wine, this is wine. China is just consuming so much wine, and they prefer red wine because red is lucky in China, so they don't drink white wine, they drink red wine because it's a lucky color. And so they're up to, let's see, 2016, $2.3 billion of wine. Some Chinese went over to France to buy a number of chateaus. The French have kind of cut that off. I think they bought 70 chateaus, so that's not the French didn't like that. So they're the top wine exporters to China. You see France, Australia, Chile, Spain, and Italy. Number of Chinese students, important, as I told you, when they make money, buy condos, buy insurance, buy cars. Some of you are in those businesses. There's a Chinese audience, I can guarantee you, especially if it's near a university. They usually try to park themselves next to a good university so they can get in. There's business there to be made by our association. So just look at that number. It's unbelievable. There's about 300,000 students right now studying in the United States. 60% of all the foreign students studying in the United States are Chinese. Chinese students is the #1 population, as I mentioned. And then here's an interesting data point. I just threw this in there last night. There's actually a work shortage. Let's just think about some of us who have connections of people who want to maybe work. I met a gentleman whose son or daughter was just recently in Beijing. Their brother have work opportunities in China because there's actually a shortage of labor in China, of skilled labor. So if you look at India, go to the chart and look at India. India has an increase between 2010 and 2020 of people in the age of 16 to 60. They have an increase of 72 million people. China has a decrease of 31 million people in that same age group. That's the working age group. So there's actually a labor shortage because I just opened up a big factory. I'll show it to you at the end. And in that factory, I have to pay U.S. wages for the managers. And I said, what's causing this? Because it's supply and demand. And then I said, I got to go deeper. There's got to be a root cause. This is the root cause, supply and demand. There's less skilled labor, and this is the outcome. High-speed trail, if anybody wants to build high-speed trail in the world, just hire the Chinese to do it. They are unbelievable. I used to drive from Beijing to Tianjin. It took 3 hours. It takes 30 minutes now on high-speed rail. It's unbelievable. And they're connecting not only China, they're connecting all of Asia, and they'll go as far as Europe in the very near future. This is a kind of mobility is very important. This is the new, just came out, launched in June, their new high-speed train called Renaissance. That's at 352 kilometers per hour now on the average. And then they have the maglev train, which is even faster. It's almost 500 kilometers an hour. That goes from the Shanghai airport, Pudong Airport, to a place just a little bit downtown. It goes so fast that if you're driving on the road and it goes by you, you thought you saw something, but when you look, nothing's there. It goes so quickly. It's maglev. It's all maglev, the ultra high-speed rail. Maglev, yeah. So here's Beijing on a normal day when it's sun's shining. And this is a satellite photo in Tianjin. You can see in the picture. That's with the pollution coming in. That's where my cough comes from. I look at it and I start coughing. It's bad. Here's a nice wedding with gas masks. I took that driving by. I thought that was pretty interesting. Chinese patents, I'm not going to spend time on this. China has switched from copies to making their own IP. And I'll tell you what's significant about that. That's not obvious. When people develop their own IP, like China is doing now, they know what went into developing it. They know the money they spent, how long they spent on it, the people that worked on it. And that's how people learn how to respect IP, is once they go through the process of patents, you know, because you hear the Chinese steal IP. Well, every major company in the world is in China. They figured it out how to protect IP, so that's like an old story. But the best result of protecting IP is when you develop yourself, you gain a respect of the process, and then you don't steal others. These are patent applications. I won't spend. And then I just want to kind of wrap up on this part and jump into some association stuff. But launching your product and service in China as a strategy to create economy of scale is what I do for some of my clients. So in other words, there's such a big market in China. If your product and service can be sold there, sell 1 million widgets in China and export 100,000 widgets back, guess what? You're getting bang for your buck. Your cost of goods goes down. You increase your profit margins. It's significant. So there's this big shift where there's a local market, and not just go to China and make something cheap. Go to China to actually attack the local market because it's the world's second largest economy. Contract manufacturing, I hear many companies that go in with making something in China, they have no legal protection. They're totally exposed. They don't have the right agreements in place. Because contract manufacturing, go to the factory and say, hey, Connie, can you make this for me? How much? And you tell me, and that's it. But that's how IP is lost, mostly through stupidity. That's how it really happens. And then partnering, my philosophy working internationally, I started working in my first career in Europe, is always partner. If you have a partner and you follow the advice of really making people share in the economic equation, you usually don't have any issues. Make sure you have the right partner, but make sure that both parties win. And then one of the things I've been doing recently is taking licensing of technologies or products or services from the US to China and licensing, getting a payment for the US company or Canadian company. I have some Canadian clients. And then taking that licensing fee and giving it to the company that has the technology. And it's non-dilutive. You don't have to dilute your shares. So you're licensing instead of raising money and then diluting your shares through ownership. It's a very cool thing if you do it right. This is my contact number and so forth. I'll come back to this slide, but I want to show you, this is a deal that I just did in clean energy. That's a day when I actually didn't wear my Aloha shirt. I had to wear a jacket and tie for the event. This was on a big manufacturing facility. This is the factory that I just finished building about 1.5 years ago, about 500,000 square feet. This is the front of the building, the office side. The back of that is the factory. This is as far as you can see, 3 football fields of CNC machines, plasma cutters, state-of-the-art stuff. This is not the Chinese factories that people think in their minds. China has world-class manufacturing. Every machine in there is either from US, Korea, Japan, all the CNC machines is top. So this was about an $88 million deal that I finished. And I was, up until about a year ago, I was chairman of the board of the company, representing both the US side and the China side. That's what it looks like. And this is just one bay. There's many bays, just to give you an idea. All with Oracle equipment. I mean, it's really state-of-the-art. And then there's my phone numbers. Now I'm going to jump up here, if I can. So that's my China presentation. I did that first rather than doing it last, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. So I want to jump into a couple of things with associations. I came to this because I love associations, love the IEA. I called out Betty, who I've known for quite some time. But what are we? I mean, I've heard many speakers talk about this. We are a trusted network. I mean, part of the due diligence, like in our association of Honolulu, the executive director does, interviews potential membership. They do a lot of the work that allows them not, if you will, foxes into the chicken house, but allows people who are of like-minded people who are leaders in the community and their business sector. So between the membership and the executive director, they actually did us a great favor, all the associations, because they do the due diligence. They check everybody out. They check your place of business. They make sure you're legitimate. And also, the members, especially on Hawaii, which is one phone call away, you can find anything out about anybody. We call it the coconut, what do we call it? Coconut? Yeah, coconut wireless. So our membership knows a lot, and that's, I think, important. An important asset and benefit of an association and IEA. Second is in Honolulu, I'm going to tell you a story. When I took over as the president of the Executive Association, and I shared this story with some of you over the last day and a half, we were bankrupt because the president before me had a big event. He didn't do this intentionally, by the way. It just happened. Did a big event, was one of our big ceremonies. I forget if it was our 30-year or 20-year or 25-year event. And when I took over, the first thing I did as president, because I'm a business guy, and my specialty is business development, I look at the books. So I did my own audit with our accountant, and I figured out, to make it easy for our membership to understand, I went up in front of the group and said, listen, it costs us, I don't remember the exact numbers, but $20 per person per meeting to actually, that's what it costs. But our revenue is only 12. So revenue 12, cost 20, guess what? That's not a good picture. So everyone understood that. So, because I've worked in China in particular, in Asia, you always try to find ways to explain things where the guy sweeping the floor understands and the CEO understands. So everybody can understand that. So we made a number of moves. We increased our initiation fee used to be around $75. Now it's, I think, $400 or $450. We did a couple of things. We did that, and part of the fun thing with the executive director is we made the executive director, I don't know if they're still doing it, responsible, excuse me, for membership. So, in other words, but in the positive context, because if you have a base salary of, let's just pick a number of 40,000 US, and it's a part-time job. So what do EDs do? They do a lot. In our association, they're very involved. But the main thing is membership. And if they got more members, what I did, at least back then, is if you got between 1 and 5 new members, you got a bonus. So it's a positive thing. And if you got between 5 and 10, you got a bigger bonus. So you incentivize the executive director to be part of the process. Of course, the best people that bring in members are actually the members themselves, because they're proud of the organization. They say this is a good group, and it's not only a group for business, but it's a group that you can count on. And in a lot of cases, in our association in particular, a lot of friendships happen. In fact, I know at least one where there was a marriage, you know, with Alex and and C. So actually marriages happen. We also did a fundraising event, and I put in place a policy called a self-sustaining policy. You could not do an event unless you can show that it's going to be self-sustaining. It breaks even. You cannot do it. You cannot use, because that's what happened before. We were $20,000 in the hole, in the red, when I took over. And I handed off to the next president. I said, my goal as president is at least to hand you a balance sheet where you're not in the hole, so you can actually do something. So one of the things we did was a great fundraising event. So one is the self-sustaining. You got to have self-sustaining policy. If you have a golf tournament, we got to make sure that it breaks even. At the worst case, best case, you make some money. And use these fundraising events also to recruit new members, because that's the best place to recruit members. You have a golf tournament, invite some people, they see what a great group we are, and they get interested in membership. The other thing we did on fundraising is we did one major event when I was there. I was in charge of all the fundraising, and I'm pretty tenacious asking for things, so it was kind of fun. But I got all the members to donate something. So we had, like, I forget, a wireless company donated a year worth of wireless time. Another guy who's in our membership, National Rent-A-Car, he donated a number of weekends for car rentals. And then we had a travel agency different than we have today. They donated a round-trip ticket to San Francisco. So then we bundled things, San Francisco, free trip, got a hotel room, got a rental car for free, and the winner of our contest for recruiting new people got the award, got the free trip. It didn't cost the association a penny because all the members stepped up to the plate and donated it. So it was definitely self-sustaining, and it made a profit. So the fundraising event we did was a kind of get dressed up, no aloha attire, you know, get really kind of dressed up and have a party. And we did it out at one of the resorts called the Ihilani. And that night, we had the best entertainment, you know, in Hawaii. And we had great food, dance, lots of drinks. The ticket price covered the cost, so we were self-sustaining. And then all the things we did a silent auction of people who donated in the association or got donations. So the association didn't just count on themselves. They went out and talked to other people, got donations. And then we did a live auction because in our association we have an auctioneer, so we asked the auctioneer to do it. And that evening we raised $25,000, clear, after expenses. And we had, at that time, our membership was about 115 members, but we brought a lot of new members in, at least 5 from that evening because they had such a great time. So one big event a year, I know it takes a lot of work, but if you do it well, you put money into the coffer. And then I did a kind of a creative thing. It doesn't exist anymore. I went to Sprint, and I said, if our members sign up, will you give me a rebate? And Sprint said, because I knew the chairman of Sprint in Hawaii, I said, would you do that for me? He says, yeah, I'll give you 3% of anybody who signs up. Every year at HEA, we got a check for $16,000 from the people whose businesses signed up. So that was an easy way, didn't cost anybody anything. But some suppliers will do that for you, for your associations, maybe even for the IEA. And airlines or somebody might give you, you know, like on a credit card, a lot of times there's a fee that can go back to if you, like a university credit card and there's 1 million subscribers, they'll give you back, you know, a % or 2. Some other ideas. One of the things I hear all the time is about how you get your word out. We do in Hawaii, and you guys probably do it as well, a huddle section. And a huddle session forces everyone to sit at a different table because some associations, everyone sits in the same table with the same group every single week. So how do you break that pattern? One of the creative ways we did is we put on the table, you know, a deck of cards, like a king on one table, a queen, ace of spades here. And when you come in, randomly you pick your card. And you have to sit at that table, the card you pick, so you don't really know where you're going to sit. And then at that huddle, no guests are allowed at that meeting. and then you have to say within 2 minutes what you do. And you go around the table of 8, and then it really gets your word out what you do so that people can understand. Because if you don't spend the time to get to know your association members, guess what? You don't typically do business with them, and you don't refer any business to them. So part of the effort of associations is really to get the members to know each other's businesses, not just through classification talks or commercials that they do, but actually get people to mingle. And you can do that in fun ways, so it's not a negative way, but a fun way. The other thing is the bottom line for associations, whether it's the IEA or any of the associations here, is you have to be relevant. I mean, I'm singing to the choir here, I know that. But if you're not relevant, relevant means, are you getting business from your association? If you're not getting business, that's where the turnover is typically, unless someone's retiring or something or moving. But typically, if there's an investment that's made in the association of time and money as membership fees, if you don't get business in return or refer business, or they drop out. And that's one of the challenges of all associations is turnover. It's retention. And I was the economic director in the city and county of Honolulu. The mayor and governor recruited me, and that's kind of the lingo of economic development, is called retention, attraction, and expansion. So retention is keeping your members, making sure they're happy. Attraction is getting new members, and expansion is expanding your different categories. And there's a gazillion categories. And I think that that is something that should be thought about. On the IEA side, one of the things is to do an analysis of all the members and the types of patterns there are in the membership, where there might be some opportunity to do consortium buying. Now, there might be, 30 people, say, in the flooring business of all our, well, why don't you create a consortium buying mechanism, and maybe you can get things cheaper if you can buy them as a group. Just a thought. Another thing is to have different classes of members and affiliations. This is a way, kind of a clever way to expand business. Now, Betty remembers when I spoke 10 years ago, whatever it was, in Shreveport, where the IEA meeting was held, I gave kind of 2 suggestions then. One was to have ambassadors. And I see my friend from Seattle here who's now implemented that. And I think that's great, because I'm traveling all the time. So I said, let's do that. Let's have ambassadors to really talk about IEA, because it's off the radar screen for most associations. So part of the key is to make people aware that IEA exists, because marketing is really important of your association. Typically, there's no budget for IEA for marketing, I would guess. So typically, when I was in the government, I used to speak to the mayor and city council and say, we have some great programs. Guess what? Nobody knows about them because you don't put any money into marketing. So I got, in my budget, when I was the economic director, I got marketing money, because I said, I'm not going to go out to the community and tell them all these great programs. I want to show them that these programs exist. So marketing is important. So maybe this consortium buying, doing a little bit more marketing. But I like the idea that I mentioned back 10 years ago, it was in Louisiana, to have affiliations. Affiliations don't have to pay. It's a mousetrap. It grows the organization's value because you have a larger network. They don't, and of course, we have to be careful who you invite and all those things, that they're not competitive to the membership. So there has to be some thought in the process. But there's a lot of international organizations that would bolt onto us, and be part of our network. And then you invite them to the annual meeting. They get to meet all of us. But you keep growing the organization. To be international, we need to be international. And I know North America is okay, Canada and U.S., and there may be some others that I'm not aware of. But we got to grow the organization, because there's a tipping point where you go past a certain number and then you're okay. If you're below that tipping point, guess what happens? You struggle every day with budgets and what to do and how to do it. And that's not only for local associations, but for the IEA. So we've got to make that a priority. One of the things that we do also in Honolulu, before I lose this thought, there's another idea of creating an international advisory council. Now, what I did that before. I was an advisor to the United Nations Environment Program special advisor, and also to World Health Organization. And I did a huge event at the United Nations on the environment when I was a UNEP, and I raised all the money. So actually, they had to listen to me. So one of the things I did is I took over the General Assembly Hall, which you saw recently a few speeches there by leaders from around the world. That same podium, that same hall I took over, and I had 2,000 kids from around the world come in and talk about environmental issues. And I had a billionaire friend of mine in Wisconsin give me a big chunk of money to do it. I had Bob Marley's son entertain on the stage, Ziggy Marley. I had my friend who created the Muppets, Jim Henson, supply me with Miss Piggy and obviously the green guy, because it's green, yeah, Kermit, green and environment kind of go together. And then I had a friend of mine donate, and we did a special comic. I don't know if you guys remember Archie, the comic book. My friend owns Archie, the comic book, so I had them do a how to recycle as a comic because the kids I thought would like to take that away with them. But the point is, I created an international advisory council, and I had the most famous guys. You look at that council, you go, wow. I mean, I had one of my neighbors, I used to live in Greenwich, Connecticut, Ron Howard, the movie maker, you know, Opie, he was on my group. I had guys from Wall Street. I had entertainers. And the rub-off effect saying, wow, look at these guys, because that helped me raise money. And it also helped me with my networks. So I had one of the founding fathers of Singapore on my group, you know, in my council. So through our collective networks, we know someone that might be a great candidate for an international advisory council to augment what we're doing and give us more network. Network is important. Connections are important. I had someone from the Honolulu Executive Association who needed T-shirts, and I'm an honorary member now. And honorary members, I was a member for 21 years. So my resources and my connections are valuable. I give those back still to the association. So if someone says I needed T-shirts right away, I connected them with my friend with the largest T-shirt manufacturer in Honolulu, and now he's getting T-shirts from there. So that is important. So other privileges that we did in Honolulu is I'm an honorary member. I don't pay anything, but if I go to a meeting, I pay for the breakfast, but I travel often. But the association that knows me, I know most of the members, they can use my network, and they have. And some of them have been complicated missions. There was one lady who was bringing some people from Rwanda. You remember that? And this lady had this doctor, actually a priest, come from Rwanda. And Rwanda, as you know, terrible things happen in Rwanda with a massacre. I mean, it's just like a genocide. And this guy tried to get out 5 times, tried to get a visa from to come to the United States just to come and speak, meet some people, and go back. He couldn't get a visa. So my friend said, Manny, you're really well connected. Can you do this? Long story short, and I won't tell you how I did it, but I got the priest to come, got him a visa within 48 hours, and he came to the United States, came to Hawaii, and we helped him out. And now we're funding a program for that young man and the prison system to do training in the prisons in Rwanda. So connections do matter, and skill does really matter. And so those are where you have honorary members who you want to be. It's not an automatic pass that you leave HEA or leave your association and you're honorary member. You have to, the board has to kind of agree on you. It's not a free pass. And then I would say another kind of thing that we did, I think that's important, and some ideas for you, is to have privileged discounts for members. Now, you probably do that in your association. So we give discounts. So if you shop from me, you get an automatic discount because you're in HEA. I don't know if all of you do that. If I go to your wine shop in Sonoma and I'm a HEA member, I get a discount. Now, you might want to think about from IEA if that can apply to the whole, if you can get a binding agreement with all the associations that an IEA member, when I go to Sonoma to see my friend over there, or I go to San Francisco and see you, and you pick me up in your limo, you're going to give me a 5% discount? So that's the point. I think we can use the IEA as one of the membership benefits that all the organizations of the IEA, how many are there, 42? 42? Okay. So those 42 organizations, hundreds of members, and we can categorize what the membership is. It's on the website. But then you can get a discount. That's one of the compelling reasons to join. I joined HEA actually not to get business. I joined HEA to give business. And I would say that the 21 years I was there, I'd say 98% of the time I've very few business I got, but I wanted HEA for a different purpose. I wanted to give business, use my network, and I wanted trusted people in my house. So when I needed a guy to do the floors, it's an HEA person. When I needed someone to do my gardening or planning, it's an HEA person. When I needed a roofing guy, it's an HEA person, because I wanted trusted people in my home with my family, and that was important for me. That was my compelling reason of joining, but mostly to give leads. And the last thing, I don't know how I am on time. I'm not looking at my watch. I'm still good? Okay. So I kind of felt that hour kind of click in my brain. So another thing that we do that I think is important is we really each week on those classifications, Pete, is it each week or every 2 weeks, we kind of show a classification that's open. Because if a classification for members are not top of mind, guess what? Nobody remembers. I carry with me, it's in my bag over there. I carry with me what's called a mini roster. I love the mini rosters. Mini roster has everybody's phone number on it. It's tiny. You need that magnifying glass to look at it. I'm blessed because I don't need to do that yet. I don't know why, but I have everyone's phone number anywhere I am in the world. I can use that mini roster, and it's got most people's cell numbers on it, so you're not going through the office switchboard. So I love that mini roster, and that mini roster saved me many times. I'm in another country, and I need something to happen back in the U.S., and I call a friend, and they make it happen. Because you can count on these associations not only for trusted business and referring your clients to them. I mean, that's a big thing when you refer somebody to someone in your association. You want to make sure that things go well because you work so hard to get a client. You don't want it screwed up by someone you refer. Oh, I referred to so-and-so, and it was the worst experience in my life. That's not what you want. So that's one of the values of the association. But I think there's some things we can do to kind of kick it up. I know there's over 100 associations, you know, I guess worldwide, is it? So we need to grab this IEA, kind of kick it to the next level. I think the leadership can do that, and also be more international. Get some associations that are in other countries. So when we say international, we are international because we are part of a global economy. Just like I showed you in China, we are connected. If I go through this hotel room and look at the towels and some of the stuff in the room, it's made in China, guaranteed. You know, so we're interconnected, interdependent. And as I said, and I'll conclude on this, world peace through world trade. And part of the mandate of an international association is do international business. And that's part of our job, is more that we work together, we don't kill each other. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm here. Yeah, I'm going to take some Q&A just for a couple minutes. Yes.
Do you know any associations in China that you could
I haven't. I know a lot of private equity guys in China, but not associations. No, but I'm a member of an angel group that started in China. They're actually big in Seattle. They're probably the most active, called Keiretsu. I'm a member of that, and they just have two chapters. But there are some associations. But that's what I go back to. Let's not get hung up on associations. Let's look for value-added affiliates. So we might connect with some of these affiliates that do not compromise or conflict with any of our members, but at the same time add value. So the PE guys, what are they doing? They're investing money in companies or buying companies. Or this angel investor group I do, they're always investing in companies. So that might be a nice fit, non-competitive, and they're putting money into companies, and we all have companies that might need a little bit of resources. There's a question here.
How do you think the potential
I can't hear you. Just
How do you think the potential geopolitical issues in North Korea and China and the West could potentially affect the economic ties between them?
Well, I won't give you my fire and fury speech, but because that's not a good idea. Nuking people doesn't really solve any problems. But where I think the issue with China is China has cut off major supplies to North Korea now, oil, some food supplies, not 100%, because you have to remember what would happen if 100% got shut off. You're going to have a mass exodus of North Koreans. Guess where they're going to go? To China. And so when a U.S. official, anybody, says to China, cut off everything, you think anyone in the world is going to rush to China's help if there's refugees running over the border? The answer is no. So China has followed the UN sanctions and upped it a little bit. But, you know, these are sovereign nations. And typically, I've delivered medical supplies twice to North Korea. And kind of the philosophy is, you know, the people are not the bad folks. You have some wacky leaders in the world. The leaders are the bad. Usually the people are all pretty good, even though they're brainwashed a little bit in their media. But if you give food and kindness, that kind of goes a long way, in my opinion. Again, this is my opinion. I think that's the way to break into a lot of these countries that have issues, is just treat the people right. And eventually, guess what? The people get rid of the crazy leader, usually. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that, you know, China's doing as much as they can, but not at a tremendous disadvantage to their nation. We wouldn't do that either. We would not do that either. Yes?
A question about the intellectual property thing or the patent. I know 10 years ago or so, I've done a lot of business with people in China, and if I brought them a product, they would copy it and produce it for you, no questions asked. Are you telling me that that's different now, that they're...
It's been different for 30 years. It depends how you do it. So having connections is important, but having knowledge and skill is more important. So typically the way I do it, if it's really a high-tech thing that you don't, and you have U.S. patents, China patents, international patents, you have all that. The first line of defense of protecting IP, in my opinion, internationally, and I've been doing it a long time for a lot of companies, and I've never, knock on wood, have an issue with IP, has been who is your partner? And if your partner in China is part of the economic equation, guess what? He doesn't want other Chinese stealing that IP from both of you. So I would rather a Chinese that I work with fight another Chinese who's trying to steal it than an American fighting Chinese. That's been my strategy. And it has worked beautifully, because if they steal from me, they're not stealing from me. They're stealing from the entity or the venture that I set up. They're stealing from both of us. And if there's a Chinese that is trying to take that, I don't go after the Chinese. I just, hey, listen, that company's trying to steal. They handle it. I don't even ask them how, but it gets handled. So that's the way I handle IP at the first level. The second level is I do all the legal contracts, whether the licensing, where you get a royalty or a licensing fee for your IP. I do that as the second layer. And I work with some of the large companies, and I tell them that to their legal counsel, and they'll argue with me. And I said, listen, I want the legal documents that reflect the agreement, but that's not the first line of defense. The first line of defense, who is your China partner? And that's why I said in the beginning, go slow to finish first. I go very slow to make sure that I get the right partner. I'm very patient in that process. There was a question here.
Yeah, it's a less thoughtful one. How much Chinese do you speak? And what are you building in that big new factory?
The new factory is for clean energy, and I'm fluent in every language in the world after I'm drinking. When I'm drinking, I understand everything, and I speak everything. And the next day, I remember nothing. Now, I speak pretty well, but in negotiations, I actually love... No, I have someone who I've trained for 20 years. They're fantastic. Former professor from the top university, and I trained them to be a business person. They're fantastic. But I like the translation because I like the gaps. I like someone to train because that gives me time to think and seem intelligent. Any more questions? There's a couple more, and then I think we have to stop. Go ahead.
Pollution is so serious there. Are they going more towards green energy?
They're spending more on pollution control than we are in the United States. There's that's one of the big misunderstandings. China is putting so much energy on pollution. But let me just tell you that we were no angels in the U.S. on pollution. Typically what happens in developing countries is you develop, you pollute everything because you have no money to fight against pollution. So you pollute, you make money, and then you go back and you clean it up. That's what we did in our country. The difference in our country is that was created by a lawsuit to create environmental law. The companies didn't, out of the goodness of their heart, saying, oh, we made a lot of money now, we're going to stop polluting. No, that didn't happen. The original environmental law started on the Hudson River, and there were a lot of companies on the Hudson River, GE and everyone, who it was called the Storm King Project, where Con Edison, a big energy company, was going to blow off the top of a mountain and create a reservoir. And in that reservoir, they were going to, during peak times, have the water from the reservoir run down and create hydro energy during peak times in New York City and the area, because they needed the brownouts and so forth a number of years ago. This was only in the 1960s. There was no environmental law before the 1960s. So fishermen on the Hudson River took them to court on the project, and that was the first time a judge says, this project will affect the fishermen because as you suck up the water, all the fish come up with the water, and when they come down and they go through the turbines for hydro energy, they end up as sushi. So it's not a good thing. So the fishermen said it would affect their daily lives. The court ruled in the fishermen's favor, and that was the birth of environmental law. And then after that, you had the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, so forth. But that's a recent phenomenon in the 60s and 70s. China, on the other hand, they're now putting in, the last 5-year plan was $400 billion in environmental pollution controls. You can't have a coal-fired plant in a major city now. They've shut them all down. They've gone to natural gas. I'm presenting a new technology in China right now as we speak. I have a project being installed. When I leave here, I go back through Seattle, change my clothes, and go back to China. And this is a technology, is a combustion technology, disruptive, innovative. And what happens is it stops pollution before it starts. Most technologies fix pollution after you have it through scrubbers and electrostatic precipitators and all the kind of stuff that's boring, like flue gas recirculation, selective catalytic reduction. I can go through all the technologies. But this technology that I'm presenting actually to the Chinese government stops the pollution before it starts, especially a bad thing called nitrous oxide, NOx. Very, very bad. One last question, and I think we're good. Anybody? Yes?
I was interested in, you're talking about having non-paying value affiliations, you know, for your association. You were talking about the Chinese, you know, you're doing a partnership. You want to have both people equally win on both sides. So I'm curious how you're approaching that large.
The thought process?
Yeah, as far as how
The thought process is where is the value add for IEA? So if, for example, I just go back to the angel investor network, they're not competitive with anybody. They invest money in small, medium-sized enterprise, typically not big companies. To me, that would be a no-brainer. And they have the largest angel network in the world, this one group. And I know the founder, and guess where the founder lives? San Francisco. So that might be a very, because you're in the San Francisco group. So I think that would be a no-brainer. I don't know if they would do it because everyone would want access to their network. So that would be, to me, a great candidate for non-paying because that brings more value to us and the associations because of their network. I mean, you have to look at these I think, in a proper way. I mean, we have a lot of experienced people here that it's non-competitive to what you're doing. But grow that network is important because the bigger the network, the more valuable IEA is. More memberships, more associations, but I believe more affiliation organizations would be great, and just evaluate what they bring to the table. And then you can have another class of membership where they pay maybe a nominal amount of money, not the same as a full member, but maybe there's an affiliate member or some other another level, and then they get to come to the annual event, and you kind of put a basket of privileges together. But it's revenue on one side for the IEA. On the other side, it's keep expanding the network. The bigger the network for IEA, the more valuable IEA is. That is very, very important. So I'll stop there. I think I went over my hour. Enjoyed meeting you all, and I'll be here for the rest of the day.